Okay, we're live.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Today is Thursday, September 9th. The time is 3:02 p.m. And this is the zoning administrator meeting for the city of San Clemente. My name is Adam Atamian. I'm today's acting zoning administrator. We have I'm going to call the meeting to order, and I will receive and file the minutes of the zoning administrator meeting of August 19th, 2021. Those have already been approved by the zoning administrator who presided over that meeting. Oral and written communications. Members of the audience may address the zoning administrator on any item within the jurisdiction of the zoning administrator that is not on the zoning administrator agenda. For items on the agenda, speakers can submit their comments on agenda items to the zoning administrator electronically. Material may be emailed to the city. The email address is located on the city's on the zoning administrator agenda, and transmittal by 12 p.m. on zoning administrator meeting days is recommended. The zoning administrator is not permitted to discuss or take action on items that do not appear on the agenda. I have checked with our staff, and we do not have any written communications for today. So that brings us to our public hearings, of which we have two. The first is a minor exception permit 21-043 at 420 Calle Gomez. The project planner is Katie Crockett, so I will turn the meeting over to her.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I am presenting this project on behalf of Stephanie Rojas. As you said, this is a request for a minor exception permit to allow a pool and a fence over 42 inches within the rear yard setback of a through lot. The subject lot is relatively large, at about 10,500 square feet in the residential low density zone. The property fronts on Calle Gomez, and Calle Del Rito is along the rear of the property. It's also somewhat unique in that it's wider than it is deep. Generally, the neighborhood is relatively hilly with irregular access to the lots on the street, with some taking access off Calle Gomez, like the subject property, and others taking access off Calle Del Rito. Typically, pools and walls and fences up to 6 feet are permitted in rear yard setbacks, which is typically just 10 feet in this zone. In this instance, because it is a through lot, the rear yard setback is 20 feet and it is treated more like a front yard. So the minor exception permit is required for the pool to be located just 11 feet from the rear property line, and for the 5-foot fence, which is required by the building code for pool enclosure, to be located just inside the rear property line. The fence will be an open aluminum picket fence meeting the building code requirements. There is a significant hedgerow at the rear currently, which will be maintained, except for some minor trimming back in order to install the fence. The landscaping behind the wall will then soften the appearance of the fence. Additionally, the property slopes down from the rear property line to the backyard where the pool will be located. So this really won't affect the character of the street much at all. So staff believes the required findings can be made to approve the project. In that there are, it's located on a sloped lot with Calle Del Rito located at a higher elevation. The proposed swimming pool is located at a lower grade, so it will not impact the character of the street. The pool is located in the property's rear yard. Standard lots do not have setback requirements for swimming pools in the rear yard, but due to the through lot regulations, this is required. Again, the character of Calle Del Rito is somewhat varied in that some streets take their access off of it versus other properties having that be their rear yard. So also, the proposed fence, again, is comprised of an open, non-solid material. So it really doesn't change the street scene in any significant way. That concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And the applicant is here as well.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Crockett. Does the applicant have anything that they would like to say at this time?
Just real briefly, Katie, you mentioned it's an aluminum fence. We were proposing wrought iron. I don't know if it makes a difference to anybody, but I just want to clarify.
Great.
But all the other characteristics are the same that you mentioned.
Okay, I have a couple questions, and I don't know if staff or the applicant is the most appropriate person to respond, so I'll leave it up to you too. But you mentioned that the slope from the Calle del Rito goes down to the pool. Why is the fence being proposed at the top of the slope by the street as opposed to further down the slope? Is this visible in some way?
The slope's not visible because it goes downhill from the street towards the house, but it's just a straight shot along the property line. And that way we don't have to go along the slope. It's a flat area at the property line, and it just carries it also goes perpendicular to a stair step that ends at the top of the property line. So it just seems like the cleanest way to do it without having to negotiate the slope and a lot of different kind of geometry if we try to go downhill.
Okay, that makes sense. So the landscaping, there's a condition of approval that requires that landscaping along the fence be maintained. Is this project going to remove any of the existing landscaping that's back there, or is the fence going to be installed behind that row of plants?
So the fence is going to be, I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. When you say behind the fence, the proposed fence is between the landscaping and the street. That's what your understanding is, right? Between the landscaping and the street was where the fence would go. So there is existing palms and hedging along that whole, inside the property line. So there is room for the fence. I'm going to be doing some trimming to give workers access, but the trimming I'm going to do won't change the screening or the privacy. It's not going to remove substantially the landscaping so that anybody would notice. It's just for access for the job.
Okay, so the fence will be in front of the plants along the street.
That's correct.
Okay. And from the picture in figure 3, correct me if I'm wrong, but it appears like most of it makes up a hedge at this point.
I don't know exactly what picture you're looking at, but if from an aerial, that whole run of inside the property line is pretty much it's either hedge or palms. So we replaced the original hedge with some palms, but it's all vegetation except where the stairs are pretty much.
Okay, yeah, looking at that image, the hedge appears to be quite tall, which actually may not comply with the landscaping requirements for fences, walls, and hedges anyways. But what I do want to ensure is that since there is a natural barrier here anyways, the addition of a fence doesn't really impact that. However, the condition of approval is written in such a way that it doesn't, it simply says that landscaping along the fence shall be maintained. It doesn't indicate that landscaping cannot be removed. So I'd rather reword this condition to indicate that landscaping along the back property line is, and like I mentioned, this looks like an overheight hedge now, but I think this would be a nicer a nicer longer term project if we could say that the landscaping, compliant landscaping shall be
how about compliant landscaping along the fence is required and shall be maintained in a healthy growing condition, et cetera, et cetera?
I like that.
Okay.
Mr. And I apologize, is it Rajenovich?
That's excellent. Very good.
Rajenovich. So that would require you to maintain landscaping, which would be right behind the fence. Is that, are you amenable to that?
Yeah, that's excellent. We're on the same page. We need it for privacy, and it softens up the fence so you barely notice it. So we're in agreement. We don't intend to ever remove it.
Perfect.
Good one.
Okay, well, with that, then I will, unless there's anything else, and I will say for the record that we have not received any public comments on this item either. So I will open and close the public hearing. And with that, I will determine the project is categorically exempt from the requirements of CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15301, class 1 existing facilities, and adopt resolution ZA 21-023 approving minor exception permit 21-043 Rajenovich fence and pool, subject to the modified conditions of approval as discussed and as read by Ms. Crockett. So that concludes this item. Mr. Rajenovich, thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you all. Is it okay if I sign off?
Absolutely. Thank
you.
You.
Have a good day. Thank you.
You too. Okay, our next item is another public hearing, and this is, I'm not sure I get this right. All right, this is item 4B. This is this is a minor exception permit 21-090 located at 213 Avenida Barcelona. The project, the presenting planner is Katie Crockett again, and I will turn the meeting over to her.
Thank you again. This is a similar request, different set of circumstances. So this lot is a bit smaller at 7,200 square feet, also located in the residential low density zoning district. It's a typical single family property. The home is non-conforming due to a 9-foot rear yard setback where 10 feet is required, and a 5-foot 9-inch side yard setback where 6 feet is required. So there's very little rear yard at this site, and the applicant is requesting a pool barrier, a fence, because they'll be putting their pool in the front, which it's not in the front setback. So that itself does not need the minor exception permit. The pool is permitted to be there by right, where they have planned it. But the pool fence that's required for building code does require the minor exception permit, because within the front yard setback, fences and walls are limited to 42 inches typically, but applicants are able to request minor exception permits to go up to 6 feet in height. So again, this would be a 5-foot high wall within that front setback area. And again, the applicant is proposing this. It's a smooth stucco veneer. It's consistent with the architecture and the character of the neighborhood. And they will be utilizing this as their private yard because of the small size of the rear yard. Staff did believe that the findings can be made to approve this project. There are, this is somewhat typical in the city in that many residences do have a larger front yard than rear yard, and those that ask for pools end up with this sort of circumstance where they're using their front yard as their rear yard, and they must have the 5-foot high pool barrier. So that's somewhat common in the city, particularly in certain neighborhoods. The 5-foot high wall doesn't span across the entire property. And it's set back from the front property line. It doesn't go all the way to the front. The placement won't encroach into driver's line of sight or obstruct views of traffic to and from the driveway. And then also landscape area is proposed between the wall and the sidewalk to soften the visual impact of that proposed 5-foot wall. A condition of approval has also been added, which requires that wall to be reduced to the maximum allowed height of 42 inches in the event that the front yard pool is removed in the future. So with that, I believe that concludes staff's report. I am available for any questions, and the applicant is also available.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Crockett. I do have some questions on this project. I also want to note that the applicant has indicated he is not able to get his microphone to work. I did send him some information about being able to call into the meeting via phone. I do not see a response to that just yet. Without his ability to communicate, I do have some concerns about moving forward, because I do have some questions that I think the applicant, let's see, let me see if there's something else we can do to try to unmute this. Yeah, I have some questions that I would like the applicant to speak up to, and I see another phone coming in. Maybe Ryan, are you able to hear us or speak?
Hey, how's it going?
Excellent. Hey, so if you can mute your the original device that you were coming in on, we're picking up some feedback. Keep your phone unmuted, but mute the other device, which I think maybe your computer.
Perfect. I'm trying to.
Now, let me see if I can. I might be able to just override that.
Perfect.
Okay.
Sorry about that, guys.
All right. I'm still getting some feedback.
If I could make a suggestion, maybe just close out however you've connected through the Zoom app, and we'll just talk on the phone.
How is that? Am I still here?
That's great. Thank you.
Perfect.
All right. So sorry
Excellent.
about that, guys.
Not a problem. I'm trying. Okay, so here we are. All right, so I do have a few questions about this application. The first is that let's see, going through the staff report, there's a note that on May 7th, 2014, the zoning administrator previously approved a minor architectural permit and minor exception permit to expand the residence. Can you provide any information on what the expansion to the residence actually was?
I'm not aware. Was that this year?
No, that was in 2014.
2014. Yeah, I have no idea, to be honest with you. I think the owner has had the property or has bought the property since then. I think he's only been living there a couple of years.
Okay. Part of that concern is that the house has been maximized, and so it's by no fault of the I will say the property itself that requires a pool in the front. This is a result of how the property was constructed. And then let's see, there's a section of the house. So there is I'll say a rear yard between the two rear wings of the property. What is
it's almost like a little courtyard almost.
Yeah, so that is exterior space, correct?
Yes, definitely exterior.
All right. Now the request is for a wall to be 5 feet tall. It looks like it's for two things. One is some privacy, but the other is for a pool barrier.
Yeah, it's not as much for privacy, more for the pool barrier compliance.
Okay. Looking at the plans, the pool complies with the setback requirements.
Yes.
The wall, though, looks to be about 17 feet in front of the pool.
Yes.
So if it's for a pool barrier, I'm not seeing the need for it to be so far away from the pool.
So pretty much the idea is that is their, like we said, I mean, they have that outside area in the back that's pretty much the courtyard, but that's pretty much their only yard. So in order to, I mean, we could push the wall back, but then that just cuts off more square footage of their actual yard that's usable.
Okay, so there are a few landscaping conditions of approval here. Have you had a chance to review those? Those would be 4.13, 4.14, and 4.15.
Yeah, I'll pull them up. Yes, I have looked through them. Let me see if I have them right here on my email as well.
So, so the staff report indicates that the final plant palette has not been determined yet, but the conditions require quite a bit of landscaping to soften this wall, and so I'm trying to figure out what is the likely landscape scheme once this wall is installed.
So kind of the idea when I first got into this minor exception permit, there was two different kind of conflicting views, where planning was telling me that they would like some higher material against the wall to kind of soften the wall, of course. But then I think it was the engineer that said that we can't have too much big material there because backing out of the driveway, you want the clients to be able to have a line of sight for the cars coming up the hill. So what my idea is to either do some 15-gallon shrubs up against or 15-gallon vines up against the wall, and then do lower plant material in the front. So first of all, we don't block the line of sight, but second, we can kind of soften the wall.
Okay, has there so has there been any thought about putting landscaping like trees behind the wall?
Yeah, I do have a planter based off of the plan, a planter on the inside of the wall and on the outside of the wall.
Okay, so right now, you know, while you cannot have hedges that are over 42 inches, you know, without essentially the same type of
Exactly.
permit here. My thought is this: looking at the street, I really don't see any similar properties.
I don't know if they were attached, but I went through and took, I think, 3 or 4 pictures of properties on that street that have, walls that are within that 20-foot setback, just so you can kind of get a rough idea of how those are all taken on Barcelona.
Okay, if I'm standing out in front of this property and I look around, there's a very open street scene around in this particular portion of the 200 block.
Okay.
And it almost seems like where this wall is located would stick out like a sore thumb. And so I understand the need. I understand the need for a pool barrier. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
The concern, though, is that is the minor exception permit actually needed for the pool barrier? And I don't see that it is, because like I said, there's 17 feet between the pool and the proposed wall location.
Okay.
So I can think of a few ways to get around this problem. The first would be to build like a fence right around the pool, and then build a shorter wall where the existing one is shown, because it's clear that there is also a desire to create more usable space in the front yard, and there's nothing against that in the code.
Okay.
So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it would be to approve a fence or a wall in the front yard setback that exceeds the height limit, but to address that wall with some different treatments of landscaping and potentially fence or wall materials. The solid wall really sticks out because there's no softening it other than adding landscaping to the wall. I know from experience that can be a challenge to maintain. And what I would hate to approve is something that ends up just being a solid wall for the, in perpetuity. Has there been any consideration of putting in some trees behind the wall that where the foliage of those trees starts about 4 feet above or 3.5 feet above the ground, so that those would not be considered hedges, and making the top part of the wall like a wrought iron fence, so that it meets the requirements of a pool barrier, but it also, when you're looking at it, would appear to be a shorter wall with landscaping behind it.
So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, whatever we have to do, but go ahead.
one thing I just wanted to point out is that we probably, Adam, if we were going to go with an option like that, would have to do the entire height of it wrought iron, because if we do a 36-inch wall with wrought iron on top, it's not going to meet the
Then
building
there's going to be
code
there's
requirement
going to be
for it'll be climbable.
there'll be a foothold.
Yeah, that makes
You
sense.
could still accomplish it with just a wrought iron fence open with, the tree foliage behind it, as you mentioned.
I mean, something as well. I mean, I could definitely do lower plant material in front and do something like bougainvilleas on the front, kind of vine tied on the front of it to soften it, and then some bigger, some taller trees behind it as well. That is, I think that the way that it stands, I think that was already our plan anyway.
Okay. Yeah, it's clear that at this point, the property is not capable of installing a pool in the rear yard portion of this property.
Absolutely.
And so that the need for that is quite clear. The addition of a pool in the front does severely impact the usability of that area. However, the need for the fence in this location, that's not required for the reasonable enjoyment of the property. And that's the purpose and intent of the minor exception permit, is that this is something that's necessary. And I don't see that it is. And I don't see that it is because the pool can be protected right next to the pool within 20 feet, or at least not requiring 17 feet in front of the pool to protect it.
Yeah, it's pretty much just about the usability of the yard. You know what I mean? Putting a fence around the pool is probably out of the question, just based off the fact that it probably looked pretty terrible.
And I understand that. I believe me, I do. I understand that. But this request creates a situation that, if it were mimicked and based on similar reasons by the neighbors, would create a completely different landscape in the front portions of these homes that would not meet the code. And so that's my those are my concerns. So what I propose is that something that provides a bit more soft, or I should say something that softens the blow of a 5-foot solid wall 3 feet from the front property line, be developed, or we can continue this to the next zoning administrator meeting, which would be 2 weeks away, and you could look at your options with a bit more time and find something that's easy, that'll provides your clients what you're looking for, while being more consistent with the city code.
Okay,
Adam?
two things really. Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to ask a clarifying question. In that, if we do continue this, do you think that say a 5-foot wall with landscaping 10 feet back, right? Like split the difference. Would that be more supportable? Because it would still keep some of that yard usable inside the pool enclosure. I just want I was just hoping to get a little bit of direction, so that as we work with the applicant, we're not leading them down a potential path that the zoning administrator would still find doesn't meet the intent of the code.
Based on the scenario, I would say that a wall that splits the difference, that's 10 feet in front of the pool, that sounds like a reasonable distance.
Okay, one last thing about, just before we get too far along. So one thing is, so the property line is actually set at 2 feet, 2 feet towards the house from the sidewalk. So from the sidewalk to the wall, you have a 5-foot planter there.
Mhm.
The 3 foot is just from the property line.
Right.
So you are going to have a 5-foot planter separating that. And is there any way to achieve this with some type of stipulation of landscaping? Or is that completely out of the question?
I think what I would suggest as staff, and I apologize, Ryan, that I haven't been working with you on this the whole time. I would suggest that we do continue this, and then you can have a discussion with your clients on how we can address these concerns. And it sounds like there are a few different ways we could do it, and we can walk through those. But it does sound like just the 5-foot planter sounds like is not going to be supported. So we might have to make some compromises, and it could probably be achieved in a variety of ways, either by opening up the fencing so that it's not solid, moving the wall back, or a combination of those things.
Okay, and then, maybe I can just talk to you after. Does this require all new mail outs and all that stuff all over again?
No, we will continue this item to the next meeting. So we'll essentially be continuing this public hearing. So there will be no notice required. We'll essentially just pick it up where we left off. Since my direction is to look at ways to soften the impact of this wall, it's either going to be, I'm assuming, a combination of additional landscape treatments, a shorter solid wall in the front, and then a compliant pool barrier behind it at some point, or the movement of that front wall back a little bit. All of those things are less intensive than what's being proposed now. So there would be no additional impact to the public, so nothing new would need to be noticed on it. But this way, you have a chance to provide some information to staff, and I will apologize to staff at this point, saying that your project planner, Stephanie Rojas, she is out of the office for 3 weeks. So this, I will work with staff to ensure that this project is reviewed and put on to the next agenda with all of the information that's been considered.
Okay, perfect. One last quick question for you. So if I was to provide a full planting plan that showed something that is there a chance that would be enough to be able to keep the wall where it is, or that's to be determined based off of the planting plan?
I think that would actually that would help for sure. Part of the consideration is maintaining a compatible street scene with adjacent neighbors. And if there's a planting plan that indicates that can be done with plant materials, and that the plant palette and the design is of such a nature that it's not likely to change much over time, I think that would go a long way. I would still recommend look at other options to avoid such a solid wall in the front. Even if this was a hedge, we would still be having a somewhat similar conversation. But I think that would be a great thing to do, is provide a planting plan that indicates that it's maintainable in perpetuity. The last thing we want to see is a difficult landscape plan that eventually dies and nobody's dealing with it, and then the city's has in a de facto method approved just a solid wall that is outside of the characteristics of the neighborhood.
Yeah, and I could guarantee you, I mean, the client over there is definitely going to have a gardener that's going to maintain everything and keep it beautiful. Not that that means anything to you guys, but
yeah, and I don't have any indication that the property owners would not do that. I just, in my experience in the city, I can vouch for the fact that not everybody has maintained.
Okay, so am I able to go over this with you maybe via email, or before we submit, or before we go through the next meeting, so we make sure we're not dragging it on, or not particularly?
So I will have you communicate directly with Katie Crockett on this item, and she will provide the help that you require.
Yes, I just want to also clarify, Adam. So the next regular zoning administrator meeting is September 23rd. Those reports are due to our administrative team next Wednesday. I'm not positive that that'll be enough time for Ryan to talk to the clients, put together a plan, and get it into me in time to do that.
So
I could probably do that.
Okay.
So what I'm gonna say is that we will I will request a memo be put together for this next for the next meeting, and the memo will simply indicate what the zoning administrator today said and requested of the applicant. The applicant agreed to submit additional information and look at additional options for this, and due to the timing of when that memo is due for publishing, I'm gonna say this with the understanding that staff will not be able to provide a full or even anywhere near complete review of the project. So the information, as long as you can provide it, we'll have that cover memo with the information provided today. That will bring the zoning administrator up to speed as far as what where this project is and why it was continued and what is the purview of the next meeting. Because this is a relatively straightforward request. I just the new details will be provided in the plans that you provide.
Okay, wonderful.
All right, well, with that, I am going to continue item, should I get this one right? Item 4B, minor exception permit 21-090 at 213 Avenida Barcelona. I will continue that item to a date certain, that being September 23rd at 3 p.m. At the zoning administrator of 3 p.m. All right. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate your willingness to work with us, and
absolutely.
I wish you the best of luck in this in the future.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome. All right. Moving on, we have no new business. We have no old business, and so at this time, I will adjourn the meeting to the next regular meeting of the zoning administrator, to be held on Thursday, September 23rd, 2021 at 3 p.m. via teleconference. All right, with that, thank you everybody for your time.